Okay, so I think you can hear me okay. So I will go on to give you a short summary of some of my work in relation to this workshop. As I said, I'm Cheng. I head the Institute for Cognitive System and the Center for Neuroengineering and a master program for neuroengineering in Munich. So from the workshop, what I can extract was the interesting part for me was closed loop perception action. I will try to gear towards that in relation to tactile and a little bit touch on the vision side. I haven't done much vision work recently, but I'll just allude to some of the older work that I have been doing. This is my group. We are focusing on mainly creating a cognitive system and that can function effectively in the real world. I wanted to understand and create these things. And the platform we are using is robots to actually create them. And other mechanisms we are using and taking account for it's such as in neuroscience, how does the brain work and how does the brain synthesize behavior and perceive perception and all that. So the group is here, that's roughly the group, and we work on all kinds of aspects, all kinds of different aspects. These are my toys. I use these as a platform to study a lot of neuroscience mechanisms and also try to synthesize in very detail how the brain works in actually perceive and act. So that's why I like the perception and the closed loop perception action part in the workshop title. Thanks, Cheng, for picking that. Okay, so let me just give you some background. I like to create machines, and this is the kind of machine I like to create. This is a full-size humanoid robot, and we've gone through very, very detailed, down to the number of degree of freedom, the type of interaction, and also we go through all the different mechanisms or different aspect of human behavior, active perception, full body imitation, dexterous manipulation, and all the way to biped locomotion. We even study biped locomotion. You know, how does the CPG work and how can that be transformed into robot and vice versa. So we do a lot of that work. So I spent 7 years building this platform as a research platform. So I use a lot of different robots to study different aspects of neuroscience, and also make some contribution to robotic. Try to make some contribution to robotic at the same time. Let me just show you some example of some of the work that we've been looking at. Usually, when we start our work, we go through a debate. What are the mechanisms in the brain to perform certain behavior and synthesize certain tasks? And one of the aspects is interesting for us some years back was this active visual perception and learning. Right? And what does it mean by perceiving and emulating how the human perceive? And at the time when we were debating this particular aspect is how does human or how do people recognize objects, right? There's two very extreme views. One is view-based, right? Taking the sensory information, learn it. Right? The other is geometry, right? Build order geometry. And then, so we ran one extreme. We say, okay, it's view-based, right? And then we synthesize a complete humanoid model learning system to actually synthesize all the particular aspects, including the phobia and the peripheral vision that is required in perceiving. Right? And one of the aspects that I really like about this is, can this be transferable? Like, can our seeing and reaching mechanism and perception system be transferred from one robot to another robot without much work? So in this case, we show that we can. I finished building the second robot, third. Yeah, I built many robots in the past, and we just transferred it. Right? Within a week, we could get this all going without re-implementing much of the software. And what it was more interesting for us was the representation was virtually transferable. We transferred all the perceived images of the robot onto another robot, and the basic controller that it learned from one robot to another robot, and all the robot has to do is just relearn certain aspect and fine-tune the whole system. So that was a very some of the earlier work we did on active perception and learning and action. If you notice that a lot of my work always try to tie together the closed loop aspect, right? In the learning part, we tie in the closed loop, right? It's active learning, active perception, right? And actually making all the different behavior. And this is one of the earlier work we did on perception, active perception in balancing, getting a robot to do fully postural control and balancing. So this was at the time, it was the first 50-degree of freedom humanoid robot that is fully compliant. And you can actually do a lot with such a system. And you can do such an interaction, and you can make the balancing. We took extreme cases how to actually do the auto balancing. And this is more than, this is like 13 years ago. This is a long time ago, quite a long time ago. Right? And what is important here is that we can control the force and we can sense the force at the joint level. Okay. And we actually, in these particular cases, we emulated the vesicular system, your inner ear, to actually determine how the posture of the robot should behave. And we determined a algorithm, which is a passivity-based algorithm, to actually control all the forces the robot observes onto the wheel to actually maintain balance. So, after spending about 7 years building this entire humanoid with force control and everything, I moved to Munich, and I wasn't happy with one thing this particular robot had. It was just state of the art. I spent a lot of time doing it. It was great. It was fun, very challenging. The issue is I can push it around. I can do all that thing. And the issue is contact. I think I don't need to preach to people in this particular audience. Contact is amazing, right? And it's amazing how we do it and how humans deal with contact, whole body interaction, social interaction, all that aspect, and contact control and classification. All those aspects are very critical to human. And I asked the question, why doesn't robot have them? Right? And at the time I looked around, this is back in about 2010 when I shipped it to Munich. I said, can I buy anything that I can use to put on my humanoid robot? And sadly, the answer was not really, okay? Most of the sensor or tactile sensor out there was focusing largely on contact at the fingertip, right, at most. And today I saw the work of the palm. That was very beautiful, Robert's work. But it's never going beyond such surface. Right. On the human body, there's up to 1.3 square meter to 1.6 square meter of skin surface. Right. And we have something like 5 million receptors, right, and multimodal receptors that we have to deal with all these information and have to make sense of them all. And I always look into neuroscience. See how information is used and what kind of modality we need, and then we try to come up with a technical solution. So I couldn't buy anything. So what do? We go and build something. Okay. So before we start, look at the biological skin cell, and can we actually emulate a lot of these? And from the beginning, I said we will not go into sensor research. There's enough people going into individual sensor research. There's top people like Somea and all those people that I'm working with. They will do the sensor. I said I don't need to go into sensor. What we were going for is what is the most practical way of covering a large surface, and also at the same time getting all the basic modality that we need, such as vibration, temperature, pre-contact, and then forces, contact, pressure, all those kind of things that we normally take for granted. And most sensor out there or integrated sensor out there do not have them. Okay, it's very rarely I find more than 2 modality on a single skin cell and stuff. Okay, this is what we came up with at the beginning. Pre-contact, I think that's very important. Vibration, that's also very important. We feel vibration very well. Human feel vibration very, very well. And temperature. And this is back in 2011. We can actually do multi-contact control. And you can control the quicker arm by multi-contact and doing multi-contact and orientation control. Because we have these accelerometer on there, we can actually detect even orientation of the system. So, so this particular example that I'm showing you, we only had 7 sensors developed, and we just throw it onto the robot and see how we can interact with it. And we show that you can actually do a very nice closed loop perception action. Okay, so well, when you go up another level, we're talking about the humanoid robot probably need about probably more than 1 square meter of skin. And how do you do that? You have to build a large number of array, huge network to actually cover the entire surface of the whole humanoid robot. And this is what we ended up. And one of the key things that we were looking at in biology is this, the sense of self-organization and minimization of information, and have super redundancy in the entire network. So if we lose 1 skin cell, the entire network doesn't die. That's very critical. So we actually deal with a lot of that information already. And also looking at the into biology, there's this thing called the homunculus. I think many of you already seen this. I'm sure a lot of you would nod your head. It has a sensory cortex, motor cortex, some mitral sensory cortex. All these are built. It's part of our brain to actually deal with all the actual representation of our body. So we thought such a scheme is needed. And one of the scheme that is needed is if you have something like 1 square meter of skin on your body, you want to know where every one of these sensors is. And if you have 5 million of these receptors, right, nobody can engineer this very well. Okay, it's virtually impossible. I have seen maybe 3 attempts at doing it, and most of them are customized. The iCup was one of the key recent Kia. They did a very, very nice job, but it's still a customized shell for every one of the robot they built. Okay, so what we decided to do is built in some kind of striatal sensory cortex to actually infer the actual every single location of the cell on the surface. And what you see here is a spatial representation of the entire network. We use only a subset of the network, right? And we use different shape. Right? So you can actually reconstruct the 3D representation of the entire surface. Right? Therefore, you can self-localize. Right? So the aim of this is when you scale up into many, many surfaces, that we don't have to perform any manual calibration or manual mapping. Okay, so that was the ambition at the time. And the second ambition at the time is human do perform a lot of these functionality since we are a child, a baby, and we try to learn to map the sensory motor action, how we act and how we sense, right? And it's part of our body schema. And there's a particular scheme that I like that we use in neuroscience. It's called motor babbling. And I do think also robotic people also using that term now to actually synthesize some kind of excitatory movement to actually learn what is the sensory motor action that is associated with. So we built in some of that into the robot. So you can see here on the left, we get the robot to jiggle, like motor bubble, right? And what it's doing there is it's learning a mapping between how it should act and where the sensor is associated with the actual each motor action. Okay, and so we did it with the KUKA arm, of course. That's fairly easy, still 7 cell. And then we didn't have a humanoid at the time in Munich, so I sent a student over to Japan. And what he did was just took the sensor, strap it onto the robot in Japan, and then get it to motor bubble. It does the 3D localization. It does the motor bubbling. And what he did was just tie in the control loop. And then he transformed the HRP2, which is a non-compliant robot. It's pretty standard, right? It's hard, it's stiff, right? And then we transform it into a fully interactive humanoid robot. Okay, so these are some of the early work that we did. So we wanted to scale up, and one of the biggest issue when you scale up, you need a lot of sensor, and they need to be really robust. Okay, so we went through the exercise. This is my technician hammering the skin. She showed that it's still working after you hammer. And the recovery time is about it's in the millisecond. She cuts it. And then we did a cycle test, something like I think we did something like 18-hour cycle test. And then the worst case is when you really nail it, literally nail it. Okay, and the important thing is, if you nail it, only the damaged cell dies. Right? Physically, there's no more electricity going to that cell, but the rest of the skin should stay alive. Okay, so this is very important when we go and upscale up at a very high level, large volume. Okay. So, of course, just doing the hardware is not enough. We have to work out all the little detail to actually close that entire loop, right? With the sensor, with the, you saw the self-organization of the network, and then you saw the motor babbling, the 3D reconstruction of the surface, and then we actually infer the sensory motor pair. And then when we get to it, closing all the loop, is that we have to work out how do you transform the skin torque into something more reasonable to control the robot, right? So our assumption, so I have to explain, the humanoid that I showed you at the beginning, it took me 7 years to construct. And it's a fully force torque controllable, right? And that's a lot of effort, and a lot of money going into that, right? To actually construct such a system. And then when I came to me, I said, I want to go the other way. I said, can I use skin to transform any robot that is non-compliant into a compliant robot? Okay, so we started looking at these. So I think I won't go into too much detail. So we just the whole thing is based on ROS, and then we have all the different control fusion, torque position, transformation, and all that interface built into the ROS framework. And it's fairly standard, right? So we know such arm as a UR5, right? It's fairly cheap. I think it's about 1/5 of the cost. When I bought the KUKA arm, I think it was 100,000. I think when I bought the UR5 it was 20. So that's 1 to 5. Okay. So I'll skip this control. Okay. So what we did was utilizing the skin, what it can detect as the actual pressure, normal forces, and then we transform this into a velocity controller to actually transform any of these robots from non-compliant to compliant. And this is an example I want to show you. This is a UR5 strapped onto a humanoid robot. There's the skin strapped onto the UR5. And we even have the a Lego hand with our skin on it, and that works very nicely. So you can actually very nicely push it around. Thing is just showing the torque resolver that we can actually synthesize the information. And so it's now he can do Cartesian control, compliant control, all kinds of control on the UR5, right, without any joint torque sensor. Right. In the old day, what do? We put a joint torque sensor on every one of these joints and try to make the best of it. It was nice, but at most you sense one reliable contact point with a joint torque sensor. Right. And what you see here is controlling the robot with a feather. Okay. So, and then to show you that we can do it very fast and very dynamically, I think some people have seen this demo on a KUKA arm. Okay, we emulated the whole thing, and we can actually do multi-contact control also simultaneously. Right. I think that's one of the key to having skin. Right, you can have multi-contact control. This is one with a feather control and with a normal control. So that being very interesting for us. Right? So the entire thing we scaled it up to from 7 cell to about 70 cell on the HRP when we tried it, and now we scaled it up to 500 cell. Okay, so there's 500 cell. Each cell have 9 receptors. Right. So that's quite a lot of information. That's 4,500 cell information. Okay, so the next challenge, I saw Cheng show this image already. It's one of my favorite photo. So in this particular paper from the IEEE, proceeding on IEEE, it summarized the whole history and all the key components we believe you need to actually transform skin onto any robot, and especially when you are dealing with such a complicated system as a humanoid robot. I'm sure, I'm not expecting humanoid robot to be all over the place anytime soon, but the challenge is how can we actually transform an autonomous humanoid robot to be fully covered with skin? What's the next challenge that I was looking at? And as in part, some of this is dealt with. So some of the things that we really need, as I said, we're using multi-modality. Right? Each cell have 9 receptors. Right? But we are talking about if you're just using the standard approach, engineering approach, you poll everything, right? You will need to sample more than 11 million sample of information at a time, and you multiply that by 32 or whatever bits. Right? It's virtually impossible for any computer to deal with it, or you will need many, many computers. Right? So in the UR5 case, we put it on 2 UR5. It requires 2 high-end i7 to do the polling of all the information and to try to process and make sense out of it. Right? And then now we're going to go to a complete humanoid robot that's going to have very little computational power and also very little energy to actually carry any more computers. Right? So we need something much more computationally efficient. Right? So this is a high scale. Now we are on the humanoid robot, we have more than 12,000 receptors, not receptors, 13,000 receptors, about 1,200 cells. Okay, so one of the things that it's really, really critical for control is that you do not penalize your control loop, right, and your torque computation. So one of the key things that we needed to do was transform, right, all these torque computation, right, and not calculate it inside the control loop. Collect all the information and calculate it inside the control. And some of the latest work we did was actually distribute all these computation of the of the joint torque control, right, on the entire skin cell. So we can compute most of these locally and only integrate them once, right, and synthesize the actual control command. So what we estimated that about 250 more than 260 skin cell is enough to penalize the control loop. It will just degrade your entire control loop. So this is showing that there is hardly any delay, virtually no delay, in actually computing all the to global computation, and then sending everything back to the control loop, and still react appropriately and sensitively. So that's first one we did on the UR5. Okay, and of course the next thing is, okay, now we have a humanoid robot, right? We have 1,200 cell, skin cell, and 49 patches, right? That's a lot of information, right? And 13,000 type of information. And then you multiply that by another 36, and then you have so much information, okay? And that's how we structure it. What is important is get a proper controller working. So what we ended up with a hierarchical task controller. It deal with all the collision avoidance, balancing, torque resolver, control fusion, all running. There is everything have to run. The requirement is everything have to run on board, and all the computation and power is on board. Okay. So what we came up with, the basic scheme is instead of using a control loop, typical control loop is send me your data and then keeps asking every single sensor to send me data. We just work out a novelty control scheme. Only send information when it's novel, right? When something is changed and then information is changed. And this is exactly how you and I do it every day, right? When you put on your shirt, you hardly notice your shirt anymore after a while. Okay, and only when we actually force on ourselves or anything really drastically change, we send information. So the entire framework is built around that. Okay, and what we end up with, we have a fully autonomous humanoid robot. Okay, and you can actually do all the basic control you saw on the UR5, but now you see everything control on board. The latency is negligible, hardly noticed. The recovery timing is more important, and that's unnoticeable because it's 42 milliseconds. Okay, so we're actually doing hot swap now. There's another paper we did a year ago. We do hot swapping, and the worst thing is you lose all your connection to the robot, to the interface. But if you just download one, right, and then you hot swap and put another one back, it does a load balancing as well. Okay, so there's a lot of little detail in the whole background, and you can see that you can have multi-contact control, which is what I really wanted. And you have two people teasing the robot, it's still no problem, and two feather is no problem either. And one of the things is the challenge. Chris Atkinson and I joke about this. Have a robot safely hug you. Okay. So this particular experiment for hugging, I attribute that to Chris as a challenge. He gave it to me as a challenge. Okay. So that's a lot of information being processed, and then the robot still responds appropriately. Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to wrap up with this particular last little bit. The supporting polygon is in humanoid robot. You'd be surprised. All the balancing algorithm and all the walking algorithm is based on one single source of information. It's a joint torque sensing sensor. Okay, all of them, right, to date. Right, and I said this is crazy. We utilize the contact of our feet so much in how we balance and how we walk. Right. So we did an experiment on this, teach a robot how to balance. And we put joint torque, not joint torque sensor. We use a skin sensor on the bottom of the feet. Okay. And I think some people said, isn't this obvious to do it? But for the past 30 years, no one has done it. Okay. Actually, this paper won the best paper prize in Humanoid 2 years ago. for actually succeeding in doing it. And you can get a better estimation of the supporting polygon, the center of mass, the center of pressure, much better than force torque sensor. And here's an example of that in detecting. So if you're just using a force torque sensor, okay, so on a second video that you're looking at, if you're lucky that your contact is pretty easily detectable by the force torque sensor, you can walk over an object very easily. All right, and even a plant, right? If you walk on the edge of it, your force torque sensor will be able to detect it. Right. But if you're walking on anything else, it's very difficult. So this is walking on the edge of a plant. It's good. Very good timing, Peter. You can still detect it. Okay. But if you're walking in the middle of the plant, it's very hard to detect for a force torque sensor. Let me give you an example of that. Imagine walking on an edge, and if you don't get the skin information, you will fall. Right? And the other example we wanted to show is with a force torque sensor, it's very hard to walk on pebble. Right? So we constructed a little pebble obstacle, right? And your force torque sensor will not be able to give you enough information to maintain balance. So that's the information we have. So this is where I'm gonna stop. So a lot of the what I presented today are all in the summarized in the preceding paper of the IEEE. You can look that up. And then there's another 20 plus more paper following up on all the little detail of all the other work. So thank you very much. So I think I try to keep the time as much as possible. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Gordon.
Okay. There's a latency. The latency in your control loop. Okay, the control loop, beautifully, for calculating the torque, virtually no latency. And I actually said that we'd probably be able to scale up infinitely on the number of cells. Right? So when we start making the next scale up level, we're going to miniaturize the sensor. Now we solve the data problem. We're going to reduce the number of cells, the size of the cell, and have a larger curvature of the entire surface. I want to see if I can match human. Okay. Any other question? If there's no question, I will switch over to Cheng.
So there are also people caring a lot about the price of your sensor.
The price?
Yeah. Question.
It will be affordable. Okay.
Because you say you can cheaply turn a cheap robot into something like a KUKA, so I don't want to pay 60,000 euro to.
Okay. The argument I've been having with KUKA is 1 to 3. Okay. So so I think we can do 1 to 3. I mean, I can sell. No, I can't sell my KUKA arm and get 3 UR5 and skin. Right. So it's not going to be that expensive. Right. The humanoid, of course, is a lot of work.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So any other? We're very likely. We're going to take the challenge. We're going to see how many robots we can actually cover. And some of the people who we're talking to in the humanoid community is that we actually will save them money, because the 2-John torque sensor, what, $6,000 a piece? Okay. Right. So the sensor is giving you much more better information it will end up to be cheaper.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I like your starting point to say I want to, you know, go out there and, you know, have something that allows us to turn these simpler robots into something that has the capabilities of a KUKA. So very good approach. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. If not, then I'll switch over. Thank you very much.